Today, we're aiming to cut through some of the noise around public opinion. It's a really fascinating picture right now.
It really is. Lots of seemingly contradictory signals.
Exactly. So we're diving deep into recent political polling data. We're mainly looking at analyses from the Wall Street Journal and CNN on YouTube.
Good sources covering slightly different angles.
Right. And our mission today really is to unpack what these polls are telling us about how voters feel about the big issues, about Donald Trump's standing right now, and, how people see the Democratic and Republican parties.
Trying to pull out those key nuggets, yeah.
We want to get to the core insights, and I think the central tension we're going to explore is this. How can a president's overall approval rating seem, surprisingly steady, despite a whole lot of turbulence and some really negative views on specific issues? It's quite the puzzle. Let's jump in.
Okay.
So let's start with something that honestly jumped out at me from the Wall Street Journal poll. Donald Trump's overall job approval rating, it's at 46%. And here's the really surprising part that's basically unchanged from their last poll back in April.
Yeah, steady as she goes, apparently.
Despite what the WSJ called a period of turbulent events.
And those turbulent events, they really are worth listing because it wasn't a quiet period.
Not at all.
The Journal mentioned, the on-again, off-again tariffs situation.
Right.
The Republican tax bill, which just barely passed. Then there's the aggressive deportation program. And of course, the whole Jeffrey Epstein matter resurfacing in a big way.
So a lot going on.
A lot. And seeing an approval rating just hold steady through all that, it's pretty remarkable.
It is, isn't it? That suggests a certain resilience, maybe? But, okay, here's where CNN brings in a really important nuance.
Yes. The net approval.
Exactly. While that 46% overall number looks stable, his net approval, that's approval minus disapproval, has actually dropped a lot.
Yeah, significantly.
We're talking nearly 20 points down in aggregate since he started his presidency. It's now sitting at minus 11 points.
Minus 11. And that drop really signals the deepening polarization. That overall number might look okay to some.
Right.
But the net figure shows the intensity of the disapproval.
Yep.
He hasn't really grown his base, and he keeps alienating a big chunk of the electorate.
So it's not just disagreement, it's strong negative feeling.
Precisely. And historically, that minus 11 net approval, it's the second worst for any president 6 months into their term going back to 1953.
Second worst. Who is worse?
Well, Trump himself. In his first presidency back in 2017, he was at minus 16 then.
Wow.
Yeah. And just for context, the average president at this point in their term, they're usually sitting at a positive 27 net approval.
Plus 27 versus minus 11, that's a huge gap.
Massive.
And CNN's overall numbers reflect that disapproval too, right? Nearly 60%, 58% to be exact, disapprove of his job performance, only 42% approve.
So a clear majority disapproving.
Okay, now let's pivot slightly. CNN pointed to something they called the biggest warning sign for Trump, and that's his support, or lack thereof, among independent voters.
Yes. Independence, always key.
Why are they so critical? Why that focus?
Well, they're often the swing voters. They're the ones who tend to decide close elections. They aren't locked into one party.
Makes sense.
And the data here is pretty stark. Gallup showed Trump's net approval with independents just collapsing. It went from minus 2 points in January down to minus 35 points.
Minus 35.
Minus 35. And the average of polls showed a similar, really steep drop from minus 3 points down to minus 29 points.
That's a huge swing in just a few months.
It really is. Over 25 points lost with that critical group. And putting this in historical context, that minus 29 net approval among independents, it is the worst on record for any president 6 months into their term.
Worst ever.
Worst ever recorded at this stage. He actually broke his own record from his first term, which was minus 23 points.
So he set the previous record and now he's broken it.
Exactly. And, there's that old rule of thumb in politics. If you're not winning among independents, you're probably not winning the election overall.
Right. It's sort of foundational.
It really is. It signals a major problem for broad appeal.
Wow. Worst on record. That's a really stark finding. I mean, if independents are that crucial, how does a president even begin to recover from that kind of historic low? Is that even possible, or does it suggest something more permanent?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's incredibly tough because a drop like that often signals something deeper than just disagreement on one or two policies.
Like a loss of trust.
Exactly, a loss of trust, or maybe a feeling that values just don't align anymore. It would take a really significant shift, either in his policies or maybe just in how people perceive him, to bring those voters back. And that's not easy to manufacture.
Doesn't sound easy at all. Okay, so we've seen the big picture approval numbers, the overall and the net and the independent vote, but let's dig into specific issues. Where are the polls showing Trump is really underwater, as they say?
Yeah, underwater meaning more disapprove than approve, because CNN broke this down pretty clearly. So, immigration, often seen as maybe his strongest issue.
Usually, yeah.
Even there, he's at -5 net approval. So, slightly more disapprove than approve.
Interesting, even on immigration.
Yeah. Then the economy, he's at -14 net approval.
Okay.
Foreign policy also -14. Trade and tariffs -15.
So negative across the board there.
And then the issue where he performs worst by far, the Jeffrey Epstein matter, he's at -37 net approval on that.
-37. Wow, that's a huge negative.
Huge. It really stands out. So, yeah, even on issues you might think are his strengths, the negatives are outweighing the positives for a lot of voters, according to this data.
That CNN breakdown is pretty clear on where the pressure points are, but the Wall Street Journal poll, it adds another layer here, doesn't it? Let's unpack their findings on some of these same issues. Start with the Republican tax bill.
Okay, the tax bill. The WSJ found, voters mostly disapprove of it.
And why? What was the reasoning?
The perception's pretty clear. Voters tend to believe it helps the wealthy and large corporations much more than them. And they also think it will raise the deficit and actually hurt the poor.
So that perception really undercuts the Republican economic message, doesn't it? Even if there's other positive economic news.
Absolutely. It creates this disconnect. You talk about GDP growth, but if your main policy achievement is seen as fundamentally unfair,
right,
it just erodes trust. It makes it really hard for Republicans to convincingly say they're managing the economy for everyone.
Yeah.
People look at who benefits.
Okay, what about tariffs? The WSJ had something interesting there, too.
Yeah, on tariffs, disapproval of Trump's handling of them outweighs approval by 17 points. So people aren't happy with how he's doing it. But interestingly, when asked which party they trust more on tariffs generally, voters actually pick the Republican Party over the Democrats.
Huh. So they don't like his approach, but they trust his party more on the issue itself. That's complex.
It is. It suggests the issue framing might still favor Republicans, even if the current execution is unpopular.
And immigration, we know his net approval is slightly negative there from CNN. What did the WSJ find?
Well, the WSJ found strong support, generally, for the idea of deporting people who are here illegally.
Okay, so support for the goal.
Right. But, crucially, voters disapprove of Trump's method. That's where the problem lies for him.
How so?
People feel he's crossed a line. They think he's being too aggressive, maybe deporting people without proper legal protections, or the specific point about sending people to countries like Sudan or El Salvador, where they have absolutely no personal ties.
I see. So it's the how, not necessarily the what.
Exactly. The execution is seen as harsh or unfair, even by some who support the general policy.
Okay, so methods on immigration are clearly a sticking point. Let's pivot back to the economy, though, because the picture there seems, well, surprisingly mixed in the polls.
It really does. You have these negative approval ratings we just talked about, but then you look at the Wall Street Journal poll.
Yeah.
And you see some pretty positive economic sentiment. 47% of voters told them the economy is in excellent or good shape.
47%. That sounds pretty high.
It is. It's up by double digits just since April. And it's actually the most positive view of the economy the WSJ poll has recorded, going all the way back to 2012.
The most positive since 2012. But wait, how does that square with the -14 net approval on the economy you mentioned from CNN?
That's the conflict, right? People might feel the overall economy is doing okay, maybe looking at job numbers or the stock market. But they still disapprove of Trump's handling of it, especially, it seems, when you drill down into specifics like inflation.
Ah, inflation. That's the key then.
It really seems to be a major drag. Remember that -14 net approval on the economy overall. When you ask specifically about inflation, especially among independents, the numbers are dire for Trump.
How dire?
His net approval on handling inflation among just independents is -45 points.
-45?
Yes. And to put that in perspective, that's actually worse than Joe Biden's numbers on inflation were about a year ago. Biden was at -38 with independents then.
And inflation was seen as a huge problem for Biden.
Absolutely. It was maybe the biggest anchor weighing him down.
Sure.
And now it seems to be doing the same, or even worse, to Trump, particularly with those crucial independent voters, something people feel every day, you know. at the grocery store, at the gas pump.
Yeah, it hits home directly. And there was that point from one of the panelists, something about the value of the dollar.
Right. They pointed out that since Trump's inauguration, the dollar's value has declined by about 11%.
11%? Is that a lot?
They described it as the steepest decline in over half a century. And they framed it as a kind of $300 billion hidden Trump tax on families and businesses.
A hidden tax. How does that work? How does a weaker dollar feel like a tax to, the average person?
Well, it basically means your money doesn't go as far. Imported goods cost more. Everything from electronics to clothes to even some food items.
Okay.
For businesses, especially those that import materials or components, their costs go up. They might absorb that, cutting into profits, or they might pass it on to consumers as higher prices.
Which fuels inflation again.
Exactly. It just reduces everyone's purchasing power. It's maybe not as obvious as income tax, but it's a real squeeze on budgets.
So even if some indicators look good, these underlying issues like inflation and the weaker dollar could be driving that negative economic approval.
It certainly looks that way.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the president tends to own the economy in the eyes of voters, whether it's fair or not. So the performance of the economy, and crucially, how people feel about it, that's likely going to be decisive for Republicans come the midterms.
Okay, let's shift gears to that issue where Trump's numbers were the absolute lowest, the Jeffrey Epstein matter, minus 37 net approval, according to CNN. That's really striking.
It is. It's clearly an issue that's cutting through and causing significant damage to his standing. It's not just a partisan issue either.
And the Wall Street Journal poll showed deep public skepticism about the whole thing, right?
Absolutely. It's quite compelling. Over 3/4, more than 75% of voters believe the Department of Justice is hiding important information about the Epstein investigation.
75%. That's huge.
It is. And about half the voters said they have no confidence at all in the investigation itself. That signals a massive trust deficit. People want answers.
And it seems the Democrats are definitely trying to capitalize on that distrust.
Oh, for sure. Axios reported on their strategy. They plan to keep this issue front and center during the August recess for Congress.
How are they doing that?
Things like DNC ad campaigns targeting vulnerable Republican districts. They mentioned 11 of them specifically. And also pushing for subpoenas, trying to force the release of files related to the case.
Why do Democrats see this as such a potent strategy?
Well, as one analysis put it, it's a rare unifying issue in American politics.
Unifying how?
Because it's not really left versus right.
Hmm.
An overwhelming majority of voters across the spectrum seem to want more information out there. They want transparency.
And Republicans.
They're described as being kind of caught flat-footed on this one. It's harder for them to frame it in purely partisan terms when so many people, including their own potential voters, are demanding answers.
There were also some interesting insights from those focus groups in Nevada, right?
Mm-hmm.
With voters who switched between Biden and Trump.
Yes, those were fascinating. They really highlighted the tension voters feel.
What did they say?
Well, for instance, 6 out of the 12 switchers believe Trump is covering something up about Epstein to protect himself.
Okay, so suspicion is there.
But in the first group they spoke to, all 6 participants said that inflation is actually a bigger concern for them than the Epstein scandal.
Ah, so there's that economic pressure again.
Exactly. People expressed, a real desire for straight answers on Epstein. They felt Trump was being evasive, trying to downplay it.
Blushing it off.
Yeah. But then you hear quotes like the one you mentioned earlier. I think we have more to worry about in our economy than someone that is already, it's out of the picture.
That really captures the dilemma, doesn't it? People want the truth on Epstein, but the economy feels more immediate, more impactful day to day.
It does. And what's perhaps unusual here is that Trump seems to be struggling to change the subject, to move the news cycle away from Epstein.
Which he's usually pretty good at.
He often has this almost supernatural ability to shift focus. But this issue seems to have more sticking power, maybe because of that widespread public demand for answers we talked about.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time on Trump's numbers and the issues impacting him. But of course, politics has two sides usually. Let's look at the Democratic Party. The Wall Street Journal poll had a, frankly, pretty scary number for them, too.
Yes, it did. Very stark.
63% of voters hold a negative view of the Democratic Party. 63%.
Which is 30 points higher than the share holding a positive view. A huge gap.
And you said this was historically significant.
It is. According to the Wall Street Journal's own polling archive, this is the worst image rating they have ever found for the Democratic Party in surveys going all the way back to 1990.
First since 1990, that's quite something.
It's a profound challenge for the party's brand.
And CNN had similar findings, didn't they?
Yes, their poll found Democrats at their lowest favorability rating since they started tracking it, down at just 28%.
Only 28% favorable. Wow. So how is this incredibly low standing for the Democrats affecting things like party identification?
Well, that's another interesting shift the WSJ poll picked up.
Yeah.
If you go back to 2017, Democrats actually had a lead in self-identification among voters by about 7 points.
Okay.
Now, that lead is gone. Republicans are actually slightly ahead by maybe 1 or 2 points. So the overall national landscape in terms of party ID is much more level, a much more flat playing field, as the analysis put it.
So the Democratic advantage there has eroded. What about looking ahead to congressional elections?
Well, there's maybe a slightly better sign for Democrats there, but still with a caveat. In the WSJ poll, if the election for Congress were held today, voters preferred Democrats by about 3 points.
Okay, a 3-point lead. That's something.
It's a good sign for them, as the pollsters noted. However, context matters. At this same point, back in 2017, during Trump's first term, the Democrats had an 8-point lead in that generic ballot test.
So their lead now is significantly smaller than it was last time around under similar circumstances.
Exactly. It suggests their position, while maybe slightly favored for Congress right now, has weakened considerably compared to the last cycle.
It really points to some deep issues for the party. And there was that mention of the Democratic 2024 autopsy in the New York Times.
Right, the after-action review of the last election.
And the criticism was that it seemed to be avoiding the really tough questions.
That was the take, yeah. Described as avoiding the likeliest cause of death. Things like fundamental questions about Biden running again or the role of Kamala Harris as VP. One panelist quoted made the point pretty bluntly. An autopsy should address the actual cause of death.
Implying the party isn't really grappling with its core failures.
Exactly. It raises questions about whether they're truly learning the lessons needed to regain broader trust and enthusiasm. If you're not willing to confront the systemic issues, it's hard to present a compelling alternative, even when your opponent, like Trump here, is showing significant vulnerabilities.
It feels like it could just perpetuate that voter skepticism we saw in the low favorability numbers.
Quite possibly. A failure to self-correct makes it harder to win back trust.
Okay, let's try and bring all these threads together now and look ahead towards, say, the 2026 midterms. It's early, I know, but what signals are we seeing? We were reminded that Democrats picked up around 40 House seats during Trump's first term midterm.
Right. That's the historical parallel people look at. And when you connect the dots with the current polling, particularly Trump's really weak numbers with independents, that minus 29 net approval, and his deep negatives on core issues like inflation, that minus 45 with independents, it starts to look potentially troublesome for Republicans.
Trouble in what way?
Well, as one analyst put it quite directly, if these kinds of numbers, the low independent support, the dissatisfaction on the economy, are what we see on Election Day in 2026, then the Republican majority in the House, you can probably wave goodbye to it. Adios amigos, as they said. Republicans simply can't hold on to power with numbers like these among key voter groups.
So these current weaknesses, if they persist, could absolutely flip control of the House.
That's the clear warning sign in this data for the GOP, yes.
Of course, as we said, it's still early. Things can change dramatically.
Oh, absolutely. A lot can happen between now and then. But these polls right now, they give us a crucial snapshot. They show the advantages and the disadvantages each party is carrying into this next phase.
And you can bet this data is shaping their strategies, figuring out where to spend the billions of dollars that go into these campaigns.
No question about it. This is the kind of information that guides targeting, messaging, everything.
So let's try and summarize the core tension here. We have a president, Trump, whose overall approval rating is, well, surprisingly resilient despite a lot of storms.
Yeah, that 46% is holding firm remarkably.
Yet beneath that surface, he's deeply unpopular on key issues like the economy and inflation, and critically, he's losing ground dramatically with independent voters. Worst on record, in fact.
A real paradox there. Strong base, but serious erosion elsewhere.
Meanwhile, the opposition, the Democratic Party, they're facing their own crisis of confidence with the public. Historically low favorability ratings.
Worst since 1990 in the WSJ poll.
So they're struggling to fully capitalize on Trump's weaknesses because of their own image problems. It's a really complex, almost paradoxical situation in American politics right now.
It truly is. Both sides have significant vulnerabilities. Now, given that the economy, and especially inflation, seem to be such persistent top concerns for voters, here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. How might the perception of economic performance, whether things feel like they're getting better or worse for people personally, ultimately influence the next election? Could it potentially override even really explosive, high-profile issues like the Epstein case?
Meaning, do pocketbook issues ultimately trump everything else?
Potentially. And if so, what does that mean for how both Democrats and Republicans should focus their energy and their messaging going forward? Where should they place their bets?
That is definitely food for thought. Does the daily reality of the economy outweigh even major scandals or controversies in the end? Something to watch.
Indeed.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the polls. We hope untangling some of these numbers helps you make sense of the currents shaping our political landscape.
Thanks for listening.
We encourage you to keep exploring these issues. Being informed really does make a difference.